This is the American Farmland Owner Podcast, a place where farmland owners, operators, investors, and the interested can get in-depth perspectives on the latest agricultural challenges, solutions, and trends. I'm Dave Price. Our guest this week is Daniel Zinnel. He's the CEO of Proteus. It's a nonprofit dealing with some of the biggest issues impacting agriculture these days, things like workforce, immigration, healthcare, education, and job training opportunities. Now, Daniel is all about balance, balancing the needs and futures of farm workers with farmland owners and ranchers. Now, he knows their needs well, which he'll explain in a minute, but first, we want to start with how and why this became his professional and personal purpose. So why this? Like, why is this your thing? Why is this your life's mission?
That's a great question. Well, I'm a lifelong Iowan who grew up on a farm outside of a tiny town called Pomeroy of about 500 people. And actually, our farm is between even tinier towns called Canoke and Jolly. And I
They're
was born,
suburbs, right?
they're suburbs of Pomeroy. That's right. Yeah, so I was born in the 80s and my dad started farming in 1978. And so you can imagine those are tough times. And I'm the youngest of four kids. My parents were 25 and 23 when they had me. And so we relied heavily on the government and assistance to help support our family. And so I have fond memories actually of going to like WIC clinics as a kid. And I can still remember the smell of food stamps when we had actual physical food stamps before the cards that are used now for SNAP benefits. And so without governmental programs like food stamps and WIC, I don't think I would be in a position where I am today, where I've had the ability to access additional opportunities. And so my parents also instilled incredible values, a very strong work ethic, where we give back to our community. There was always something going on where we were involved in community service of some sort, whether it was at our church or helping a local farmer who had got hurt. And so those values live on through me. And I feel like working at Proteus is an opportunity for me to help others who have gone through similar experiences as me, and also others who are going through much different experiences. We provide services to farm workers like me. I grew up going out in the fields for not only my dad, but I also did work for other farmers and within the community around Fort Dodge. So I technically would have qualified for services when I was younger that Proteus provides now. But we also not only provide services to people like me, but also migrants. And so I had worked at Proteus before my first stint with the organization for about 7 years, and I tell people I had to leave in order to gain some additional skills to bring back to the organization. And so it's been incredible to be here almost 5 years as CEO at Proteus.
You're kind of bringing a couple of things together when I hear you tell your story. When we talk with people, especially those who've grown up in smaller communities, but then in particular those who are in farm communities, this kind of self-reliance, I'm just going to keep working harder and harder and harder and harder and harder because we're going to make this work. And you talked about you had a good sized family, so mom and dad had a lot of mouths to feed. So what's now as an adult, how do you see that balance between I'm going to bust my butt to take care of myself and my family versus we needed some help because the 80s were super hard?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's a delicate balance. One of the values that I feel like has been instilled in me is humility. And uh, I know a lot of farmers, a lot of families in agriculture are very proud people who have that maybe mentality of hard work and feel like if they're going to work hard, they're going to get themselves out of whatever situation might happen to them. However, there are times where it's okay to ask for help, and I think it's really really challenging to do that Um, but I see that happen all the time, and communities come forward to help each other out so many times. Like I bring up the example of a farmer getting hurt. Farmers get hurt on the job all the time, and unfortunately need other farmers to help them get their crop out, right? Like there's other potential implications that could go on if individuals don't ask for help. And so I think we see people ask for help more often than we did before, but I think there's still an opportunity for us to engage in conversations and talking about what's going on in our lives. And I think that's also connected to maybe some of the mental health challenges that we see farmers face. And farmers have some of the highest suicide rates we see across the country within specific populations. And so I think all of these things are connected, right, with what we're talking about today.
There's there was something that I read, a quote on your website that I wanted to read to you, a quote from you. And you say, we've had some slight alterations through the years as an organization, but one thing has stayed the same: the centering of farm workers and their families' needs. What does that mean to you?
I think farm workers are connected to all of us, whether we realize it or not. They help to put food on our tables every single day. And farm workers are some of the most incredible people I've had the opportunity to engage with. They are some of the most hardworking, diligent, and joyful humans that I've had the privilege to experience interacting with. And so without centering farm workers, our organization would not be in existence today. But I think so many more individuals, so many more community leaders need to really think more often about farm workers and their needs, because they fulfill such a need within our community, within everybody's lives, not only helping to put food on our tables, but helping to create the agricultural economy we see across our country, but especially here in Iowa as well.
Many of our farms depend on migrant workers to temporarily come in and get it done, and then these folks go on somewhere else, generally speaking, another part of our country, most likely. Uh, as you well know, our immigration conversation, everything about it's a cluster, right? I mean, we look at Congress for years has just argued, and it's really just a political talking point. Nobody really, no matter whether you want to hammer the left or the right,
Mm.
neither side really seems to come through and really do the big picture answers that we need on things. So, what are you doing with the folks that you come across, plus the farmland owners? How are you blending all of this?
Yeah, it's quite the challenge, as you just described. I think one thing that we always try to make sure that is at the forefront is recognizing that we are talking about human beings here, right? Like it's not just this commodity. I think so many individuals talk about farm workers, immigrants, migrants as this additional commodity. And it just doesn't sit right with a lot of us, right? When we know that these are real life human beings who are doing their best to provide for their families and themselves and trying to just do their part to contribute to society. And so I think that's one thing that I always try to stress whenever we talk about immigration. We are talking about real life human beings who have families, loved ones, and at the end of the day, they're just trying to do their best. There definitely are so many opportunities that we have within immigration reform that could create an easier life for farm workers, but also create, I think, easier lives for our agricultural economy, our farmers, our corporate agricultural entities in hiring individuals to uh, do the jobs that need to get done, right? We see so many worker shortages going on across the country, not only in agriculture, but I think immigration reform could help solve so many challenges that we are seeing within the workforce, but also in accessing the services that these individuals need. Not all farm workers qualify for services, even permanent residents who are here with proper documentation don't always qualify for SNAP benefits or other additional services that really they could use those resources, and they're doing incredible things for all of us within our communities.
You're not a union, you're a nonprofit. So, how are you supported? How do you carry this out?
We rely heavily on governmental funding. We receive funding through the Department of Labor, through the Department of Health and Human Services. We have a little funding through the state. We collaborate with the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services through their Care for Yourself program, and then other foundations and also individual donors, among other various funding sources.
And you are Iowa, Nebraska, right?
Iowa, Nebraska, and Indiana.
And Indiana. Okay. And so, what kind of regional approach do you take for this? Because some of the stuff you're getting into, I mean, these are like deep fundamental problems here. So, how do you address this geographic region?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, one of our programs that we provide is providing access to education assistance and job training. And so that's a program we do provide across all three states, where we are focusing on helping lower income farm workers or anyone within their household get access to getting some sort of degree, credential, certification in an in-demand industry. We can help pay for some of their tuition or provide a stipend so that they can help cover their basic living expenses. But we really try to focus on helping them, if they want to stay within agriculture, getting connected to an employer where we can provide them with some sort of certification that's going to apply directly within that agricultural entity. We could also work directly with an agriculture employer where we provide on-the-job training. Maybe they have a worker who needs some skill development where we could pay for them to get their CDL or get some additional training on the job so that they can advance within that agriculture employer. And then across the three states, we also provide health and safety training where we're going literally out into the fields to make sure that they have access to heat stroke and heat stress prevention. We're seeing so many more farm workers get exposed to that, and unfortunately are seeing deaths still due to heat stroke within the Midwest. And additionally, we do education on pesticide exposure, how to prevent exposure from pesticides. And then in Iowa, we are a healthcare provider. So we are a federally qualified health center, community health center, where we have a unique model where patients can access care at our locations, but most of our care is mobile, where we take our team, go on site where they work, or set up a temporary mobile clinic at a library or at a church in communities where farm workers are located.
Um, I'm a sports fan, so I follow Drew Bledsoe a little bit, former NFL star quarterback. He has a wine, kind of a winery plus up in the northwest part of the country. When he came through into Des Moines, he was talking about at his operations a couple of years ago, they made the commitment to kind of do year-round employment. They were used to having temporary workers come in there, do their thing, and then they had to move on. And it's tough to get those same folks the next year, right? Because they have to go for the best opportunity. And he talked about, and it's a larger operation that he has here, but he found that, and they had to figure some stuff out. And obviously they had some financial stability, they could do this. But once they were able to hire these folks year round, full time, give them benefits and everything, their turnover was almost zero. Now, a lot of people, especially in smaller operations, that's pretty challenging to figure out some kind of year-round employment for folks. Most of the folks you deal with, are they temporary in that they are almost always on the move, or what are their lives like?
All of the above. I think it just depends. We do see a lot of workers who've made Iowa their permanent home, where they're maybe working for an employer year round, or they're working for a number of employers throughout the year. We see a lot of migrants who come through Iowa and maybe go up to Michigan, over to Ohio, maybe down to Florida. A lot of our domestic migrants come through from the Valley in Texas, so southern Texas. But it really just depends. We do see a number of farm workers who are migrants come back to the same employer year over year. And in some locations, we see a third generation of farm workers. So they're the third generation within their family who has come back to this employer. And I think farm workers are just like everyone else. If they are treated fairly, if they're compensated appropriately, they're going to be very loyal to their employer and either come back year over year or even stay and maybe seek further advancement within that entity in order to stay working for that employer. So it really just depends on the situation, the employer, the worker's family, what's going on in their lives. But I'd say all of the above of what you're describing.
A lot of folks are not making a ton of money. Uh, this is hard physical labor. You might have the farmland owner or operator saying, "Hey, our margins are tight. Sure, if we made a lot more money, we could pay a lot more money." So what's the balance here? This seems to be, kind of a long-standing challenge for us, and it's going to be tough to attract workers into that industry because of the demands that you know very well from
Yeah.
from growing up and how hard that is. So how do we improve this?
What I'd say to employers, use Proteus. That's one of the reasons why we're here. We can provide access to their workforce on a sliding fee scale to access healthcare. So our healthcare services help to keep our workforce healthy. We decrease sick leave, and so we're helping to contribute to agriculture employers' bottom lines by helping to provide access to healthcare and keeping their workforce healthy. Uh, Use us for health and safety trainings. We can prevent potentially liability for employers who aren't providing the necessary education to their workers on heat stroke and heat stress prevention. And then also on the education assistance and job training side, come to Proteus if you have a worker who you want to maybe upskill and turn them into a year-round employee or an employee that can do more skilled type of work and get paid better, reach out to us. But I also think it takes a little bit of an investment from employers in their workforce, knowing that it is going to pay off. Kind of what you're describing with the winery, just that little investment is going to help decrease turnover, increase productivity, and contribute to their bottom line. So I would encourage employers to be innovative and try new things because I think that's what our agricultural economy needs right now. And even thinking about that, we're seeing innovative things from some employers having their workers work at night to try to get away from the heat during the day. Now, that also maybe adds some additional complications for childcare, but I think it takes that type of innovation from our employers to really think about how we can not only provide our workforce with a healthy, safe environment while also making a livable wage and also allowing them to make some money at the same time.
All right, let's give you a hard question. You're in Iowa, Nebraska, and Indiana. Why not more than that?
Eh, That's a great question. I think our board has said we're kind of a Midwest organization. I think we would be definitely open to expanding if the timing and capacity and funding makes sense, because we do feel like we have a good model that has worked well with farm workers in our states and are definitely open to looking at expanding services at some point if it makes sense.
And the reason I ask is just in your analogy about uh, the transient nature of a lot of these folks. They're clearly, they spend part of their year outside their region. So does that mean, are you working with other entities? How does this all come together, the framework?
Yeah, we're members of a few national farm worker or agricultural worker organizations where we definitely do try to coordinate. And one example of this is the Migrant Clinicians Network. And so if we have farm workers going to other states, we can get them connected with Migrant Clinicians Network so that they can find an employer or find a healthcare provider within an area that they're working in so their care can continue that way. I think there's always work to be done to improve collaboration and partnership so that farm workers have easier accessibility of services, but there definitely is some infrastructure in place in order to create um, greater access for farm workers of services that they need.
When you're talking to farmland owners and operators, and they bring up the challenging question of somebody's status, do you venture into that? The whole discussion about immigration laws, policies, all that stuff, is that something you don't even mess with? Like, how do you address those questions?
It's a good question. For our education assistance and job training program, the individual who is accessing services through us has to have proper documentation. So that is an area where we definitely have to have the conversation with the individuals who are accessing services. Now, for all of our other services, legally, we can't ask the question. And so we are not in a position to judge anyone. We are here to provide resources and services to the individuals who are in need. And so that's kind of how we approach it with the employer. If their workers are accessing one of our programs, we have to engage in those conversations, but anything else, legally, we can't ask that question.
All right, you're the boss. You've had countless hard conversations about really deep, whether it's like you mentioned, mental health, you've got education issues, overall physical health, um, immigration laws, all this kind of stuff. How about you end with a little guidance, if you will, on how is our country going to have the conversation going forward on folks who are already living here, folks who want to move here,
Mm.
because this ends up being this toxic mess of nothing other than now we're in an election year, so it's going to come up again like it does. And then 2 years from now, 4 years from now, how, how is it possible? So you're right in the middle of this world. How can these folks on a federal level, what is your advice to them to do something? And I appreciate your organization is not like you're not lobbying for, for this. So this is outside your purview, but you have so much history and experience in talking about tough stuff. So what's your advice for these people who refuse to take action?
I think it's with any issue, talk to the people who are impacted and engage in a conversation with them. I think so many people's eyes would be open if they came out to a migrant camp or came out to a field to see farm workers working a 12-hour day in the most extreme heat conditions they could even imagine. But I think we need to engage in conversations and take the lead from those who are most impacted to hear human stories. I think we need a human approach to most issues that are going on in our country. And I'd like to see our leaders really engage with those who are most impacted by the policies that they are considering moving forward with. And so that would be my approach for probably everything. But I think come out with us and see us in action and see the farm workers in action and then engage in conversations to hear about what's going on in the lives of farm workers to make a more informed and more human, maybe centered decision on how we move their country forward.
Thank you. We appreciate the time.
Thank you.
That's Daniel Zinnel, CEO of Proteus. You can learn more about Proteus by checking out our weekly email newsletter about Daniel Zinnel. You can find that at AmericanFarmlandOwner.com, the place where landowners get their news. While you're there, go ahead and sign up for that weekly email newsletter. Did I mention that it's free? Again, you can find that at AmericanFarmlandOwner.com. We'd appreciate it if you can like and share this podcast so others can join our conversation here. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for what you do.